My name is Leo, and I spend an absolutely ridiculous amount of time staring at compound interest calculators. Like some people, binge Netflix shows. And here is what I've learned. Most people have absolutely no idea when their money stops being a savings account and starts being an actual wealth-generating machine. They think building wealth is this perfectly linear process where every dollar saved gets them exactly $1 closer to financial freedom. Save $10,000. You are $10,000 richer. Makes perfect sense, right? Except it is completely backwards from how money actually works. And this fundamental misunderstanding is exactly why so many people give up right before things get interesting. Look, I get it. You check your investment account after a year of disciplined saving, see that it is barely grown, and think, what is the point? You're doing everything the financial gurus told you to do. You're skipping the daily Starbucks run. You're packing lunch. You are avoiding those impulse Amazon purchases at 2 a.m. And for what? Your account balance looks almost the same as it did 6 months ago. It feels like you're pushing a boulder up a mountain while everyone else is driving past you in their least luxury cars. But here is the thing that separates people who actually build wealth from those who spend their entire lives wondering why they can't get ahead. There are 3 specific net worth milestones where everything changes, not gradually, not smoothly, dramatically, like flipping a switch. And if you quit before you hit that first milestone, you've basically run a marathon and stopped at mile 25. Let's talk about that first milestone, $100,000. I know what you're thinking. Leo, $100,000 isn't exactly retire to Bali money. And you're absolutely right. But here is what most people don't understand about this number. Getting to $100,000 is the hardest part of your entire wealth building journey. Not because it is the biggest number, but because it is where compound interest is still warming up on the bench while you're doing all the heavy lifting on the court. Imagine you decide to invest $500 every month. That is roughly $125 per week, which isn't exactly pocket change, but it is also not impossible for most working adults. It is basically the cost of a few restaurant meals and impulse purchases throughout the month. Assuming your investments earn an average annual return of 7%, which is actually quite conservative compared to historical stock market performance. Here is the part that makes most people want to throw their phone across the room. It takes nearly 8 years to reach that first $100,000. 8 years. Think about that. 8 years of discipline. 8 years of watching your friends post vacation photos on Instagram while you're eating homemade sandwiches. 8 years of declining invitations because you're watching your spending. And after all that sacrifice, you look at your account and see $100,000, which doesn't feel like it changes anything about your life. You still need to show up to work on Monday. You still stress about unexpected car repairs. You're nowhere near retirement. This is the valley of despair, where most people quit. They look at their progress and think, if it took me 8 years to get $100,000, it is going to take me 80 years to get to $1 million. What is the point? But here is where the math gets absolutely wild in your favor. Out of that $100,000, roughly $46,000 came from your own contributions. The other $54,000, that is pure investment growth. Your money making money. And from this point forward, those investment returns start doing the heavy lifting for you. I met this guy online who started investing at age 12 after talking to one of his lawn care customers. The customer was what he called a silent millionaire, lived in the same house for 50 years, drove 20-year-old vehicles, worked a low-income job for the gas company. Nothing flashy, nothing impressive by society's standards. But the guy understood something that most people never figure out. Wealth isn't built by looking wealthy. It is built by being patient enough to let compound interest do its thing. And here is the kicker that'll blow your mind. The next milestone is $200,000, and it only takes about 5 more years to get there. Let me repeat that because it is important. Nearly 8 years to go from zero to $100,000, but only 5 additional years to double that amount. You are still contributing the same $500 a month. Suddenly, the mathematics starts to shift in your favor in a big way. Of that $200,000, UV personally contributed about $78,000. The other $122,000 is pure investment growth. Your money has been quietly working in the background, earning returns on returns. And suddenly, those gains are becoming substantial. This is where people start to actually believe the system works. Someone I know recently shared that it took him 10 years of saving and investing to get to $100,000. But 3 years later, he is sitting at $375,000. That is not because he suddenly started making dramatically more money or discovered some secret investment strategy. It is because compound interest finally woke up and decided to show up to work. Now, you might be wondering what happens during the next stretch toward that magical 7-figure milestone. This is where the process goes from being a slow grind to something that is actually addictive to watch. By the time you've reached $400,000, your personal contributions total about $108,000. Your account balance shows $400,000. That means nearly 3/4 of your wealth has come from investment growth rather than your own savings. Think about what this means in practical terms. Your money is now making more money for you than you are saving yourself. At a 7% return, your $400,000 portfolio is generating $28,000 a year in growth. Remember how long it took you to accumulate your first $100,000? Now, you're generating more than a quarter of that amount every single year passively, while you're sleeping, while you're binge-watching shows, while you're doing literally anything else. This brings us to the second major milestone, $650,000. This is where things get really interesting from a lifestyle perspective. Here is why this number matters more than most financial advisors will tell you. The median household income in the US is around $78,000 a year, which is achieved by someone trading 40 hours of their week in exchange for a paycheck, dealing with bosses, commutes, and all the other joys of corporate life. With $650,000 invested at an 8% rate of return, you are generating $52,000 a year. That is not full financial independence, but it is substantial passive income that can dramatically change your relationship with work. Suddenly, getting laid off isn't a catastrophe. It is an inconvenience. Getting sick doesn't mean financial devastation. You have options that simply don't exist for people living paycheck to paycheck. And there is a freedom that comes with this. That is even more important than the money itself. Your entire relationship with risk changes. When you have substantial assets working for you, you can afford to take calculated risks. That could accelerate your wealth building even further. Maybe you've always wanted to start a business, but were too afraid to give up your steady paycheck. When your investments are generating enough to cover your basic living expenses, you can afford to take that entrepreneurial leap. Perhaps you want to go back to school or switch careers. You're not worried about making rent. This is the real power of wealth. It buys you time and options. There is this family I heard about who raised 5 kids in a 900 square foot house with 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. They stayed there for 27 years. By society's standards, they were making all the wrong choices. Their kids probably felt embarrassed when friends came over. They probably got judged by relatives for not upgrading to a bigger house. But you know what they have now? 7 figures in their net worth and 0 debts, while their neighbors were upgrading to McMansions and leasing new SUVs every 3 years. This family was quietly building wealth. That gives them options most people can only dream about. That is the trade-off nobody talks about. Wealth isn't built by impressing other people. It is built by being patient enough to delay gratification. While everyone around you is spending money they don't have on things they don't need. But let me tell you what happens when you finally cross that magical 7-figure threshold. Your first $1 million doesn't just represent a number on a screen. It represents a complete psychological transformation. When you hit that $1 million milestone, which happens around year 29 of consistent investing at $500 per month with 7% returns, it feels like you finished a marathon where the prize isn't just a medal. It is the ability to breathe easier for the rest of your life. Someone recently told me they hit $1 million in May at age 54. And by the time we talked, they were already at $1.15 million. They said the compounding at this stage is scary. And they're right. It is scary, but in the best possible way. $1 million portfolio can safely generate $40,000 to $50,000 in passive income, which means even if everything else goes wrong, you're not going to end up eating cat food in retirement. That is genuinely liberating in ways that people who haven't experienced it can't grasp. The fear of financial catastrophe doesn't disappear entirely, but it shrinks to manageable levels. You won't necessarily feel rich, especially with inflation, but you will feel validated. You've proven to yourself that building wealth isn't just for trust fund babies or people who got lucky with cryptocurrency. Here is what is fascinating about reaching this milestone. It is just the beginning of what becomes possible. Someone shared that it took them 24 years to hit $1 million, and 4 years later, they hit $2 million. That is not because they suddenly started saving twice as much. It is because the mathematics become absolutely ridiculous in your favor. Once you cross that threshold, to reach $2 million, you only need your investments to double, which historically happens every 7 to 10 years. The jump from $2 million to $3 million is even easier. You only need a 33% boost. But here is where most people screw it up. They hit their first million, and they take their foot off the gas. They relax. They start spending more. They basically coast from there. Big mistake. The people who understand wealth building at a deeper level realize that reaching your first million is like graduating from college. It is a huge accomplishment, but it is also just the beginning. They maintain the financial discipline that got them there in the first place. They understand that every financial decision has an opportunity cost. That expensive dinner is just costing them $200 today. It is costing them thousands in lost investment growth over the coming decades. Now, I know what you're thinking. Leo, this all sounds great in theory, but what about market crashes? What if the economy tanks? These are legitimate concerns, and they're exactly why having a long-term perspective is so important. Here is a secret about market crashes that most people don't realize. If you're consistently investing over decades, you should actually learn to love them. They allow you to buy more shares of quality assets at a discount. When prices drop, your $500 buys more. When the market inevitably recovers, and it always has historically, those extra shares you picked up during the downturn become incredibly valuable. Market downturns become opportunities, not crises. There is someone in their early 20s who started a Roth IRA at age 19 with index funds like the S&P 500 and Vexus as their base. Smart kid. They're doing exactly what they should be doing. And in 30 years, they're going to be absolutely loaded, while their friends are still wondering why they can't get ahead. The difference is they understood early what most people don't learn until it is too late. Time in the market beats timing the market every single time. So, there you have it. The 3 milestones that transform your wealth-building journey from a slow crawl to an unstoppable force. $100,000 when compound interest finally wakes up and decides to help. $650,000 when your money can generate substantial passive income. And $1 million when you won the psychological game that most people don't even know they're playing. The math doesn't lie, even if it requires more patience than our microwave society typically appreciates. Start investing consistently today, because 29 years from now, you'll either be thanking yourself or kicking yourself for not starting sooner. And trust me, the regret of not starting is way worse than the temporary discomfort of living below your means.